Yeah, so I think we can start actually. So in terms of quick introductions, Simon, would you like to start off?
Okay, well, my name's Simon Cohen. I'm founder of Cohesis. Cohesis has been going since 2019, and we've been implementing MRP and various other types of cloud software for the last 4 or 5 years.
Very cool. Yeah, my name's Mark. So I head up partnerships here at Katana. Been here for 5 years. So partnerships for Katana include a couple areas. So one is our technology partnerships. So whether it's with Intuit, Xero, Shopify's of the world, our channel partners and service partners and agency partners, and also our implementation partners. So yeah, really excited to have Simon here today. So in terms of the agenda and just to go through kind of some general formalities of what we're going to run through, we're first going to start out with a little bit around each of our companies. We're then going to get into how to spot the signs that your setup might be holding you back in terms of when you're looking to get started, how to avoid the most common software missteps, how to create a framework for smart, scalable decisions, and then some Q&A at the end. So I think what's really cool about the way that we're going to be doing this webinar is we're really looking to balance a bit of that strategic with real world life kind of examples, have some really good structures and processes that Simon and team go through in terms of working with many Katana customers, but also customers across the globe. And again, I think from a perspective of just understanding how long this webinar will take, it'll be about 30 to 40 minutes in terms of content. We'll leave some times at end for some questions. You'll see a chat box below. Feel free to ask questions throughout. We actually have somebody behind the scenes that'll be able to answer as many questions as they can, but we'll do our best to answer any outstanding questions at the end for you. I think I got through most of it there. Yep. I think that's about it. So with that, for those that don't know about Katana, so in terms of Katana, we've been around for 7 years. We're in the inventory space. So we look at ourselves as catering to the modern multi-channel merchant, and that can mean a lot of different things. But if you do anything from manufacturing and looking at running that whole operational process within a system of truth, that's where Katana comes in. So inventory, order management, the purchasing side, all of that can be done within the Katana system. And then we operate as a best in breed platform. So then we look to connect into the systems depending on how you choose to run your business. So if you're e-com and you run your shop on Shopify, Amazon, or the likes of that, we connect into those systems seamlessly, similar on the B2B side with systems like HubSpot. And then we have very flexible APIs to basically connect into any other system of record that you might be working with today. We work with now, it's like funny, slides get outdated pretty quickly. We work with 1,600 businesses globally, and we really do try to make our system easy to use. I think that's one of the, it sounds like a simple thing, but I've been in the European inventory space for 10 years, and it's one of the things that really stands apart from a lot of the other systems that are in market right now. So that's Katana in a nutshell. And then Simon with Cohesis.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So basically, Cohesis is what I would consider a boutique IT consultancy. We specialize in helping organizations transition from legacy systems, old tech stacks, and to newer ways of working, whether that is a combination of cloud systems, now obviously introducing things around AI as well. But it's really about helping organizations make the right decisions with regards to their tech stack. And we do that in a number of ways. We provide IT consulting in the sense that we develop strategies, technology roadmaps. We help organizations manage risk, whether that can be technology risk or things like key person dependency risk. And we help build a picture up as by looking at the different factors that in terms of how technology is used within an organization and help organizations therefore select and implement the right systems for them. Also, what we have developed are a series of methodologies that help in this space that helps small and medium organizations that want to get to that next stage of growth do so in as risk-free, a coherent approach as possible. And then the other thing over the last few years, what we've really been doing is helping organizations leverage the Microsoft 365 tech stack. And so we've developed a series of applications branded under the Agendis name that help organizations in things outside of their core business process. So core business process for us is everything that goes from opportunity all the way through to cash. But then there's many processes such as risk management, HR, time recording, request management that float around the outside of a core business process. And we help organizations integrate and implement tools on the Microsoft 365 platform, because most organizations have that, and join the dots together so that they can grow and work smarter. And by doing that, we help organizations scale faster. So it's a combination of those things. And Cohesis is that I suppose an organization that helps businesses join those dots together on both the strategy and the technology side.
That's great. And again, thanks for coming in here today. The thing here that we're going to start out with is, I guess, a big question that we get from a lot of our customers too, and I'm sure it's the same on your side, is signs that you've outgrown like your legacy system. So if, for instance, you see somebody coming in from a legacy tool, and actually just to keep it social as well here, just curious around if you want to, those in the audience, feel free to drop what systems you're using right now in the chat, because it's always interesting to see kind of where you're coming from today. But what do you find with like customers coming in from legacy systems and tools in terms of like things that are kind of common themes on your side of the fence?
Yeah, it's typically yeah, and good question. I mean, basically, it seems to just jump up on people all of a sudden, that what was working and has been working for a period of time just no longer seems to work the same way. And typically that is because of growth. And when you're a 5-person organization or a 10-person organization, or you grow from 10 to 20 or 20 to 30 or 40, the number of people means that they're all trying to do different things, or they're all trying to work in a particular way. And so the systems and processes, typically spreadsheets or legacy systems that once did work, just no longer work. People need different data. There's and there's more people making decisions, and the lack of quality data, and especially in spreadsheets, they're great, but they're not business systems. And you have the problem that people make mistakes. They key in the wrong things on the wrong on the wrong rows, and people overwrite data. Often they're not necessarily backed up. So you organizations all of a sudden have risk in a way that wasn't there before. And if you don't have the right data, the chances are that you are not putting yourself in a position to have to make the right decisions, and mistakes creep in as well. And sometimes those mistakes can be costly. Also, if your data's not joined up, then people will start to create spreadsheets on spreadsheets, and they'll have workarounds. And those workarounds, kind of beget more manual processes that drain more time. And I tend to think of it a bit like the boiling frog analogy, that, if you started in that position, you would change it straight away. If you put a frog into boiling water, it would jump straight out. Put a frog into kind of like, cold water and turn up the heat gently. They don't realize that, it doesn't realize that it's actually getting hotter and hotter, and it's boiling to death until sometimes it's too late. And we sometimes, we've had a number of instances where organizations have reached that point of crisis because they can't maneuver, and they've either failed audits or they've made mistakes that have been really costly. And the classic one is that companies realize that they need to change, but they don't have the time to do so. I've just been speaking to a potential client this week whose bookkeeper has left the organization. And the person absolutely wants to change systems. He wants to go in and look at his processes, look at his systems. Physically doesn't have the time to do it because he's actually had to go in and uncover loads of rework a whole lot of bookkeeping data because a certain number of mistakes have been made, and he's got some serious issues to deal with. And that comes from not having appropriate systems, whether it's MRP or finance or what have you, but just having that reliance on poor legacy systems and processes eventually catches up. And organizations at some point reach that point of crisis where they think, right, we absolutely need to change. And it's like the silent killer of restricting growth and scalability. The question is, at what point becomes the right time to actually look at those systems? And uh, I would often say it's worth looking at it continually, but also just because everything's running or maybe running right at the moment is to have that plan ahead. What does the business want to achieve in the next 1, 3 years, 1, 3, 5 years, and plan to have the right systems in place for that. Don't wait until until you've reached a point of crisis, is what I would say.
That makes total sense. I was going to say, so part of that, I guess, is, you want to get there before you hit that crisis point, which makes sense. But then going into kind of the next area, if we look at it, is, I guess, around that consequence of choosing poorly, though, right? So it's like, okay, I kind of have that, those things are happening, right? And it's like, okay, there's some data challenges, there's this or that, or what have you. There's some pain. But then, yeah, what do you see, I guess, on your side in terms of like choosing poorly, because that's definitely something that people have fear around. And also, even coming into us, there are a lot of companies that come from those legacy softwares, and then they don't want to get burned again. So what are some of like the experiences that you've had around this?
Yeah, I mean, what we tend to find at the moment is that many people will go out there and search, and they'll search because they'll get the sense that okay, what tools are out there, and they'll nowadays do a chat GPT search or perplexity search or whatever, but they'll search the
Yeah.
internet and then they'll come back with a series, a list of softwares. Then they'll contact vendors like yourself, and they'll maybe get trial systems that you get your 14 days or whatever it is. And then if they've got time, they'll have a little bit of a play and they'll start to form a decision based on what the software looks like, and they'll maybe just see if they can get a handle on it. But and that's all great, and they'll maybe start to kind of come to form a judgment on one or two kind of software. They'll be thinking about their tech stack, and they'll be thinking about one or two key requirements that they've got. Yeah, and then they'll start to form an opinion. But and that's where the danger sets in because they don't necessarily sit down with a list of requirements and then really map out what it is that they need from not just this one piece of software, but how does it all fit together. And so quite often people and organizations will make a decision because actually they'll may have thought about 30 or 40 or 50% of what it is that they need, start to implement something and put some time into it, and then all of a sudden realize that actually it didn't work out. And then they've started down the licensing route, then they'll try different things, and all of a sudden it becomes a bit of a mess. And so not having a plan as to how to make a decision, or not even, having a list of requirements, or at least fleshing out what those requirements are, not engaging within the business, because typically it's one person that is making the decisions who's typically time poor, and just wants a quick fix. The danger of doing that is that it's not fully considered. You actually push people down a path that they're working harder because they've then got two systems that they're trying to implement something and what have you without a clear plan, and people get frustrated. And it's not just a waste of time and money. It's the effort that goes in. It's the wasted effort. And depending on who is making the decision, if it's the CEO or what have you, then it's kind of different. But if the CEO is kind of saying to someone, "Okay, go and find us a system," and then all of a sudden it doesn't work out because they haven't thought it through, then people get demoralized, and then they move on to the next system and then the next system. And quite often we have clients that have come to us that have gone through two or three or four systems, realize that they haven't done it right, and then they've got fatigue. They've kind of got change fatigue, and it needn't be that way, because with a structured process, you can actually tease out how the business works, or how you want the business to work. What do you need from not just this piece of software, but any integrations with other software, and then you work to a plan. And it may feel as though you're going the long way round the track, as it were. But most often it is the fastest way to actually get systems that you can then rely on, the systems that you can implement first time and then rely on for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And so right at the start, it is absolutely key, because and we'll talk about it in a bit as well. But it then comes into the change management. If you've actually done the work correctly, then actually people across the business will see that it can work for them and then pull into the project, and then they'll accept the fact that actually this will help them rather than hinder them. And if people implement software that is just going to hinder their work, they resort to going back to the spreadsheet that was tried and tested for so long.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, because we also see like on our side, the there's this essence around like customers coming in and they'll spend, tons of money, like, 10x more costs in terms of like trying to integrate certain systems, trying to like make things certain work. And it tends not to necessarily work itself out. And then no one uses it. And it's like the most expensive system is the one that nobody, ever uses. And we tend to kind of run into like people who have that history in terms of choosing poorly, spending a lot of money trying to get it going, and then it not working itself out. So, everything that you're saying there runs very true on our side too. And then you were talking about it before, but then you get back to this kind of concept around like, how do you know it's time, right? So I'm a customer, whether I'm with a system already, maybe I'm not with the system already, when do I have all that pain where I should be thinking about it? And we listed a couple of things here in terms of questions you could ask yourself, but curious on your side, like, what are some of the things that you tend to see most often come through when it's like, okay, this is really the time that you should be, you're at a certain point in your business, or, you're with something that isn't working for you. Like when should someone start to consider things on their side in terms of it's time?
Um, I mean, typically, when we talk to clients, it's at the point when they've realized that something needs to change. Yeah, and it's either too hard using the spreadsheet or whatever tool that they're using. Um, it's a case of mistakes are being made. And I think when people start complaining around, the amount of manual effort something's taking, you know, even people that have manual systems and, are used to working in the way that, things have been done for the last however long, 5 years, whatever, they all know that there's automation out there. They know that there should be a better way of doing things, and organizations haven't, or people haven't made those decisions. And it just gets to the point where it's too hard. And organizations or business leaders, CEOs, directors, what have you, that have growth plans, reach that realization that actually, if we want to scale this business, we need to have better systems in place where they can get accurate data, where they can, use that to make decisions, and also delegate. Because the thing is that, scalability for leaders involves being able to delegate and have other people do some of the work. And then you can only get other people to do some of the work if you actually have data and systems that enable you to actually take a step back, but to be able to look in and to have a window into the world as to what's going on within the business easily. We were looking at one organization, and they showed us their spreadsheet, and everything, it was literally everything to do with an order, and the production and the invoicing and the purchasing was on one row within a spreadsheet. And
It's
and
quite impressive, by the way.
sorry, say that again.
I was about to say it's quite impressive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and it's worked for them.
yeah, yeah.
And for a period of time up to this point, that
Mhm.
spreadsheet, that process has worked for them. And now they're at the point whereby they've launched a new website, they've got new sales orders coming in, and it's all of a sudden too chaotic. And they've now gone into their busy season. So they're too busy to actually follow through in terms of their desire to change their systems. And now they're going to go through their busy season in to quote them, kind of chaos, using this spreadsheet, and they know that they want to get to the a point in time in the future where they have new systems, and they just can't get to it. Now, ideally, you know, they would have thought 3 months ago, 6 months ago, you know what, we're approaching our busy season, this spreadsheet thing isn't kind of working right now. Maybe we look to change our systems and get everything lined up ready for our next busy season. And that goes back to what we were saying before. And it comes back to the boiling frog analogy in the sense that they've now kind of like the temperature's turned up and actually they're stuck in the boiling pot for their busy season. Yeah. And no doubt we'll hopefully talk to them again when they get through the other side of that. And that's fine. And it's just a situation that some companies find themselves in. But just that bit of forward planning to know that actually the busy season comes around every year or every season or what have you. Let's plan in when we want to make these changes. And I suppose to answer the question about when do you know, it's typically at that point of crisis. When can you know is basically if you're looking ahead and think it's just becoming a little bit too hard. It may be manageable now, but what if our business grows 20%? What if our business grows 30%? And, as leaders, as CEOs, as directors, it was part of the virtual CIO work that we do as well. We sit down with organizations to help them make that plan ahead. It doesn't all have to be done immediately, but to have a plan as to what do you want your business to do? What new products are you going to launch? How's that going to work? And therefore, what systems do you need to support that?
I love it. Yeah, I like that what if piece, like thinking future ahead, because I think sometimes you get so locked into what you're doing, especially during busy season. You kind of can stop yourself at the end of it, just be like, okay, we got through it. You take a breath, and then next thing you know, it might be the busy season again. But if you start thinking about it, it's like, what happens if it is 20% more, 30% more? How do we accommodate that type of volume, or any sort of complexity in terms of growth that you're going after? I think that's a great way to look at things. So with all that though, this is actually my favorite part because Simon, you got some amazing frameworks that we're going to go through right now. So I'm going to let you do a little bit more talking right now and talk about Moscow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of how we try and help clients, one of the first things, and as I said before, is to look at what you require. What are your requirements from your software? And it could be one piece of software, it could be the whole ecosystem. And one way that we help clients is, and obviously clients can, everyone can do this, but is to really think about what are your must-haves. And so we use the kind of like the Moscow kind of acronym, which stands for must-have, or should have, could have, or will not have. And a must-have requirement is just that. What must the system do for it to be a valid choice? Yeah, it's a red line. You can't cross it. The system must be able to do X. Then you go down to the should haves, and typically, the system should be able to do this. We maybe could live without it, but ideally not. And if a system fails on too many should haves, it's probably not right. Maybe you can compromise on one or two, but not too many. And then the C is a could have. That's a nice to have. Yeah. And great if it can do it, but no worries if it can't. And then a will not have is something that is out of scope. We do not need the system, and we do not foresee the need for a system to do a will not have requirement. Because not all requirements are equal, and different parts of the business will have different requirements. And they will often see and have different opinions as to what is a must have and what is a should have. And this is where we come back to organizations that make mistakes. Organizations make mistakes in implementing software because they've not actually looked at the requirements and prioritized them and surfaced them across the different key stakeholders of the business. Because someone may make a decision on behalf of somebody else and not really understand what's going on in the other part of the business. So by actually surfacing these requirements and being able to prioritize them enables organizations to actually have an honest conversation about what they need. And that's the starting point for them being able to assess which tools are actually the right tools for them. And it's literally like what we do is we do like a kind of tick and a cross and make it very visually simple for organizations to see which software actually meets the requirements. Now, the thing is, um, teasing out some of those requirements is not always just about functional things. There's often things around security, there's things around support, there's things around integrations, data ownership. All those kind of things need to be, need to be considered. Performance, and then you've got things that aren't necessarily functional features, but you've got accessibility, you've got user interface. How easy will the software be to train out? How complex is it to actually use? And so these are the things that also need to be considered, and that's how we help clients, come to that decision. But we've also had, when we've gone through this process, we've also had clients change their mind. So we typically, when we help clients, we'll do the review, we'll go out, look at different pieces of software, we'll assess them, we'll come back. And we've had clients change their mind on what is a must-have requirement because when they've seen two pieces of software side by side, using their data, using their process, they said, no, no, we want this one. We don't care about that must-have requirement. This is the piece of software that we want. And that's fine. Clients, can do that. But they're doing it with confidence because they've gone through a process to help them actually understand what it is that they want. And what was a must-have requirement yesterday could be a should-have today, and something that actually isn't that important. One example I've got is a client wanted production data to 12 decimal points. Yeah. And one piece of software could do it, one couldn't. And at the end of the day, the 12 decimal points didn't matter. 10 was perfectly fine enough, and they went with the software that they liked. And so that's just one fundamental example as to how things can change. But you're running through a process that helps drive that confidence in the decision making, which then helps the decision stick.
That makes sense. And then, you got a nice little slide here in terms of your implementation approach.
Yeah, so the aim of this is we want to help clients embed the software successfully to the point that when we leave them, they feel confident running the business with the software. So that's the end point in mind. To do that, there's a process that starts at the very beginning with understanding the business process, understanding the data, understanding the requirements. How do they want the systems to integrate and work? Once we understand all that, we can configure the platform for them. So we go from a discovery phase through a transformation, and then we go into embed. If the discovery phase is done well, then the embedding of the software starts right at the beginning. But we have a discovery phase first, and that's the change management. Embedding is that change management. And if you bring people along that journey, then actually the change becomes easier. But at first, we have a discovery process. Then that leads us into configuring the platform in the way that the business needs it to be configured. And that includes importing data, cleansing data, and making sure that the data lines up. We have templates for that. We build out any reports and templates, purchase invoice templates and the like. And then we play back to the client again to help them bring them into how the system's being set up, how it works. And also by creating workflows, they actually have an artifact that describes the business process that they have, which is evergreen, which means that when people come and go, they actually, more people come in, say, everyone can be singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were. So that part of the change management is covered off in the playback session, so everything ties together. We do our own acceptance testing when we share those test cases with our clients. Clients can add more if they want, but we do our own acceptance testing, which again builds confidence into the end solution. We then train it out. We then zeroize all of the test data. We go live, and then we go straight into a hypercare period, which then helps them kind of, they have the opportunity to ask any particular questions, things they're not sure about, and again helping them build that confidence in the tool. So when we leave at the end of the hypercare period, then they're off and away using the software with confidence. Now, obviously, implementations have have their foibles, their issues happen and what have you. Nothing's, we all like to think that every implementation is perfect. Things happen, people get sick or people go away or business changes their requirements, whatever. But the idea is that we follow through and we support them so that they're using the software, in the right way. And
Yeah.
that's our process. There's a lot more to it that goes on under the hood, but at a very high level, that's how we help businesses, lock in that the systems to really, help them get what they need.
Yeah. And the thing I love about this too is like you see, I don't know, like there's a lot of people that I've seen kind of choose or select, someone who can do the discover pretty good and get the platform going. But it's also like it's that ongoing piece and that embedding piece, the way that you guys are approaching it on top of everything else. It's like that is actually the most important piece because otherwise it's kind of like it can be in and out pretty quick. And like you said, anyone changes, anyone leaves, anything kind of happens within the organization, it's not kind of locked in a really strong way to get usage going, right? So I love this structure.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's all designed to actually help the client. The clients pay us to provide a service, to implement a solution for them. But it's a partnership, and at the end of the day, the client has to run the software. It's going to run their business, so we try and help, bring them in through the process, through that embedding part. Yes, we do the work that we need to do, but really, we try and show them and light up the pathway for them so that they can actually be self-sufficient.
Yeah, I love it. So now we have this. It looks scary at the first glance here, but Simon's going to go through it nicely. He knows which one I'm going into. Your system application workflow. So this is just a little bit of the work that you do for customers here. So yeah, maybe as best you can navigate those watching. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, sure. So what we're
Mm,
looking at here is an example business process flow that my team has put together for a client, and we start off and with all of the things that we do, we'd like to, we may be implementing an MRP solution, but for us, whenever we talk to a client, we want to understand where are your orders coming from. Is it coming? Are they coming from e-commerce? Are they coming from emails? Are they phones? Are they everything? Are they walk-ins into a store? Whatever it may be. And so if we can understand where orders and we always talk about opportunity to cash. So for an
mm,
opportunity comes in or a sale comes in, if it's e-commerce, straight away, okay, what's going on? In some cases, it could be a project that someone's actually custom manufacturing, and we follow the flow and we talk to the business. We talk to different people within the business. So here you can see that there's some manual processes. There's an MRP system in there. There's Zero for finance, and there's Monday in there as well for some task management. And so we actually map it out from new project, creating a quote. Do Our drawings required in this? There's a draft process. Then it goes to quotation. Do we get the order? Yes or no, kind of thing. At what point do we create the invoice? Then we get into do we have materials in stock? Yes or no. If no, we create the purchase order, receive the materials, create the purchase invoice, etc. Do we need subcontractors? Yes or no. And then we basically work it round until whatever's built is built. Is the quality approved? Then we go into shipping and close the project down and invoicing. And then you've got Zero that, and it could be MyOb or what have you. But what this does is it shows that we've helped them think about what their process is. At which point does MRP get hit? You know, and if there's a CRM in the mix, then maybe that they have to get a quote approved. Some people do, some people don't. Does it? At what point does an order go straight into MRP? Or what point does the production schedule need to be created? And what have you? And what kind of information is required from an MRP solution. So this is just one example. But by doing this, if we go back, on the slide, we don't that we need to go back, but from the
mm.
slide previous where we've got our discovery, this is part of that discovery. Yeah, this is part of the business process and data mapping to understand where does the data make sense to different people, because it's not going to be one person that's doing all this. there's different people involved at different parts of the chain. And what we need to make sure is that they've got the right information at the right point of their business process so they can make the right decisions.
Makes sense. And then
Yeah, and
next slide,
this is
please.
again another example. This one here, the client's using Square, Shopify, and Fair, and so they've got walk-ins, they've got wholesale, and they've got e-commerce. So orders are coming in from different areas. They've got Stripe for payments, they've got integration with NAB for banking. They're on Zero. They've also got shipping involved here. So there's different ways that a sale can be made here. They also then need to work out in terms of, at what point is the payment made? Different rules for, say, wholesalers as opposed to like, people buying from the website. At which point, how are they going to invoice? Which point do they create the manufacturing orders? Again, checking if materials are in stock. You've got the purchase order creation, shipping materials, inspection as well, quality approval processes in place, and then to determine, it goes into invoicing, processing deliveries, and interaction with bank payments and what have you as well. So again, very different business process. Some things are similar, but the entry points into the process, this and exit points with banking, Stripe payments, and what have you, is something that needs to be considered. And
Makes sense.
again, going from the beginning right to end.
Yeah. I guess the other thing here too is by going through this process too, it's just like, again, I look at it as it's a continuation plan, right? So if someone new comes in that you're trying to train up, or someone leaves, again, you have this all mapped out. So it kind of just continues onwards as a piece for these business
Yeah,
owners,
yeah,
right? And their teams.
absolutely. And one other point to make is that I didn't really make before is you see
Mhm.
the dotted lines on there. This is
Yep.
where integrations are catered for, and so sometimes integrations can be native between
Mhm.
systems, and that's also a consideration where you've got and Katana has many integrations with many different tools, which is important. But where you've got those integrations is, can we leverage them?
Mhm.
And and also not all integrations are equal, yeah, in the sense
Yep.
that there's different depth of integration between systems as well. So we actually have to work out, is enough data, is the right data being transferred at that point in time? Then if not, we then have to look at APIs, and obviously most, well, pretty much all of the tools that we would look at would have to have APIs available and good documentation. But it's a case of, again, not all APIs are created equal. So therefore, it's a case of,
Mhm.
how good are the APIs? How good is the documentation? Are the right data points able to be passed? And this is something that we're working through a couple of things with a couple of shipping pieces of software, because it's harder for some software to integrate on that basis. Some of the features aren't quite there that what a client what was expecting. So there's always challenges to work through with the integrations, and this is another one of those gotchas that people often forget. They'll see that one piece of software integrates with another, fine, it must do everything that I need because the two pieces of software integrate. But quite often the integrations aren't deep enough or don't actually give the required result. So this needs factoring in, because quite often clients will go in and implement and then think, oh, I didn't realize that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it may integrate, but not at this point when I need the data. And so that then becomes a bit of an issue that is only realized later on down the track. By doing this kind of piece of work, we can actually identify those kind of pain points in advance and save a lot of time and effort.
That makes sense. I was going to say, I actually runs in nicely. So we're at the final leg of the webinar right now, but there's three questions that we have for you, Simon. Common
Cool.
implementation pitfalls. So if you don't mind, the first one is, what happens? So someone comes in and they decide to, oh yeah, we don't need to do discovery. We're just going to jump right into implementation. We know exactly what we need and we know exactly what to do, and off we go. And we didn't do our due diligence. Also, if others, feel free to write in the chat here too, if there's anything that typically happens in or has happened on your side of the fence here. But Simon, I guess on your end of things right now, yeah, what happens when discovery doesn't happen?
Yeah, so you know, as I was saying before, people will jump in, and they get led in as well. Oh, it looks like it can do everything that we need, and we hear that a lot. And quite often that's great because it's great if a piece of software does look like it can do everything that it needs. So they go ahead, they implement. Typically, they don't do the initial steps, so they haven't thought through the business process, they haven't thought through their full requirements. And we had one example recently where lady implemented some software, implemented QuickBooks as well, and then realized that she couldn't get the reports that she needed. And this was she had a particular requirement where she needed specific reports, had not thought about them, was not part of any scope. And it was only right at the end when we pretty much implemented that all of a sudden this new requirement came out. And so, things like that all of a sudden cause pain where there needn't be. The other thing as well is that the lack of documentation means that as people come and go, the system's in, there's no handoff, there's no proper training, and the people who self-implement do it because they know that they can, but quite often they're at a senior point within the organization, and they're doing multiple things. They're wearing multiple hats. They're probably in charge of operations, so they want a system in that works the way that they want, but they haven't considered some of the pitfalls, and they haven't considered training. They haven't considered documentation. They may not have got all their data clean in the first instance, and so people don't necessarily know how to use the system. And one of the things that happens there is that stock often gets stock levels get out of shape because it's not necessarily being trained out correctly. And as soon as the stock levels go out of shape, and they're incorrect, then it has knock on consequences. We implemented. Well, we were introduced to a client in Singapore that we implemented for once they had self-implemented and actually failed an audit because their stock was horribly out of shape and it affected their finances. So they're keeping the wrong stock. They thought they had things in stock that weren't in stock. It was just a mess. So they needed to re-implement. So what they thought was a shortcut ended up completely costing them a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of pain. But yeah, not following a structured process for software implementation is a high risk endeavor.
Makes sense. Okay, now second question. Oh, is it working? There we go. So underestimating change management. So it's a little smile on this one, but what's your thoughts on this mishap?
Yeah, well, it's change management again starts from the beginning, yeah, and bringing your team along for that journey. But and it starts from actually mapping out the requirements and how do we want this to work. If you think about something like an MRP software, it is fundamental to the business process of making the things, or inventory management, but making the things that you're going to sell that you want to get out the door and you want to earn money for, making sure you've got the right materials at the right point and the right data so you know what you need to purchase, what's going on, is super important. Making sure that the people using those systems are lined up, trained, and capable to use those pieces of software is therefore important. So shouldn't be underestimated. And at the point that you implement those systems, making sure you have the right documentation, that you do invest in training, that you do invest in that testing and training process, means that actually when you actually come to use the software, that you can do so with confidence.
Makes
Otherwise,
sense.
you have these bumpy implementations, and then people think, "Oh, I don't trust the data in the system. I'm going to go and create a spreadsheet," and therefore you've just kind of gone backwards instead of forwards, and so it's really giving the appropriate time, and it doesn't. And I'm not trying to say that this has to be a massive amount of time, just the right amount of time. It just needs some thought and it just needs some planning.
Makes sense. And then the last question for you is just around, misstep number three. What happens when you neglect training and neglect kind of the proper diligence around data validation?
Yeah. So in terms of training, I mean, we run training sessions when we do implementations, and we've had people, attend training sessions whilst they're driving. Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
we're doing videos and we're expecting people to try and use the system. We're running people through, how the system should be working. It's typically a hands-on exercise to build that confidence. It's a safe environment. If people don't pay it the right amount of time and attention, then what can what can be expected? What happens is that they're not quite ready to use the software. They'll probably make mistakes. They think that they've done it. They're probably then, we've had it before where the hypercare period that we offer then needs to be extended because they've just not been ready and they've not paid it, the due attention. Coming on to data validation, I mean, it's the same old saying, rubbish in, rubbish out kind of thing. You know what I mean? If you don't get your data cleansed and what have you, and if you don't get your data lined up to begin with, then, again, you're adding risk to any kind of implementation. The things that we often want to make sure are right are things like obviously bombs, routings, obviously getting the items right. And that's also in terms of structuring items with regards to variations, with regards to SKUs, categories, things like that, making sure that all of that's correct. The routing in terms of the production process, if we know what the production process is, then making sure that that is set up correctly as well. Failing at that, again, as I said before, if you don't validate your data correctly and we don't make sure it's cleansed, then people will lose trust in the system because they'll realize that actually, what the system's telling me is not the reality as to what I'm seeing in the warehouse. And so therefore, as soon as that happens, trust is lost and people will find other ways of deviating from using the system. So it's just a shortcut to disaster really sometimes.
No, it makes sense. But with all that, I was about to say, great timing here. We have about a couple minutes left. This is just a little bit of a wrap up, but when leveraging, system of record for inventory with something like Katana, um, everything around manufacturing, inventory, production, visibility, and our system of record, and you combine that with Cohesis and the expertise, and these are just a couple of the examples of some of the elements that Simon and his team brings to play. But I really do think there's something around that change management, having that structure, really, it's almost like it's almost like you should always be investing in yourself, like going to training and doing things better for oneself. It's kind of the same thing here where it's just like you put in that investment, you can get so much more out of your business. And it just is a matter of like finding that right timing when you have that pain, and selecting the right people and the right organizations to kind of help you through that process, because that can save you a lot of time and headache. Because Simon and his team, for example, they know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time. So this is kind of like the end of the webinar. There was a couple questions and a couple questions prior to that we have. There's one question around which was very nice, Simon. There was someone who was asking specifically, is this recorded? There was great content today, which I also agree with. So great work, Simon. Yes, it was recorded. We're going to share everything afterwards. There's also a question surrounding some improvements asked around the BigCommerce integration. We can get back to you on that. It was anonymous, unfortunately, but if you're open to saying your name, we can get back to you directly. But if not, we can just write a general piece around that. What I will say is, high level, a lot of our integrations and new integrations, those sorts of things is a big priority for Katana going into next year. I just don't have the exact timing on what that looks like specific to BigCommerce. So I'll keep you posted on that. I guess another general question, I guess for you, Simon, I know the Katana side quite well, but just generally, like, how long do you find like these projects take? And I know every project's a little bit different, but just from a timing perspective, as you're going through all that process piece, like how fast, if there's a ton of pain, is it something that can get done in a month or two, or is it something that you typically find to be like 3 to 6 months, or depending on what it is? I know, but
Yeah,
where does it land?
yeah, it varies. So we have, I think, a couple of months is achievable if the client is, in the zone, has availability or can make their team available and they want to get things done. It's quite sporty. I would say 2 months is quite sporty. Typically, implementations last or take 3 months, typically. can, somewhere between two to 3 months. They can be longer, if we're doing lots of integration work, if there's a lot of testing, if there's a lot of complexity, they can take longer. We have clients that things happen, go on holiday, people get ill, things get delayed. So, various things can happen. But yeah, typically 2 to 3 months. If we do a piece that helps clients with software selection and helping them make the right decisions before they implement, then the whole process can take maybe slightly longer. But the work that's done in helping them build the confidence in the actual selection of the software means that the implementation goes a lot more can be done more quickly because a lot of the pre-work has been done. So it can vary. I mean, as you know, we've implemented Katana in Australia, we've
Mhm.
implemented Katana in the US, we've implemented Katana in China, and those implementations are very different. It was for the same company as that company expanded, but those implementations were very different because even though it was the same company, there's different number of items, different number of SKUs, different number of people being trained. So it's never one size fits all. I think the American implementation was actually much faster than the implementation in China. Because there
Yep.
was more work to do in terms of the training and the rollout. So that's just to give one. Hopefully that answers the question. It
Yeah.
does vary, but as a general guide, 2 to 3 months.
No, that's perfect. I actually don't think there's any other questions from the audience. It's up to you. I know we were talking prior to you had a funny story this week regarding one of your customers. I don't know if you want to kind of go through it just as a final anecdote around what you see
Yeah,
in market. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I had a call earlier on this week, and this guy said to me, I hired a smart kid to implement some software for me, and I've got 100% faith in what he's done. But do you think you could have a look over what's been like, how it's been configured? Because my accountant's asking questions. That's basically the opening line. And so the
Mhm.
more and I was like scratching my head a little bit. So this smart kid, why isn't he helping you? Oh, he's gone away for 3 weeks. Did he leave any documentation? No. When's he coming back? Well, I actually, dug a little bit deep. I'm not sure he is coming back. Um, and he then goes, as I was asking, he then goes on to say, I think I tried to make some changes in the system, but I think I may have made it worse. Do you think you can have a look? So of course we said well we can and we have to be fair but you know I was a little bit shocked at that it's quite funny in some ways but it's also quite sad in other ways that this guy has trusted his business to a kid no matter how smart he is, that kid is no longer around. There's no documentation, there's no training. The guy who's running a small business uh, is now fumbling around in the system and his accountant's asking questions, which probably leads it to suggest that something's not being configured correctly and that could upset the financials you know, why not just invest a little bit of time and do it properly to begin with? You know what I mean? And save that pain. And it was quite funny at first when, talking about the smart kid, but the more you kind of think about that, the more just having a little bit of expert help up front may have just saved a bit of pain.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And not to go into like too much around like pricing costs or whatever, but there's just too many scenarios, and we've seen it happen time and time again. Is like putting out that investment cost on services like yourself, relative to like hiring out to try to solve the problem, or doing the small cheaper routes, like you said there, in terms of like somebody who might be very smart just doesn't have experience doing it. Trying to take those shortcuts, it just long run it doesn't help the cause, right? So if you're serious around growth, you got to invest in yourself and your business ultimately.
absolutely. And it's around getting the right experts who are there to help you grow. And that is exactly coming back to the start of what we spoke about today. It's exactly
Yep.
why I founded Cohesis is because that's our mission is and yes, we've got different frameworks in terms of how we can help organizations, but they've been built on um, learning and what have you, but they're there designed to help businesses take the shortcuts. But taking the shortcut yourself without the knowledge and without the experience is fraught with risk. Hiring the right people or finding the right people that are bought into your growth um, is is a smart move because it will that money that is seen as a cost is actually an investment to help you multiply more quickly.
No, makes total sense. Well, again, Simon, and to the audience, thank you guys all for coming today. Really appreciate it. There's some booking links here. If you've got your phone, you want to take some quick snaps, but if you don't have your phone on you, not a problem. All this will be made available after the webinar, including the recording of the webinar. And again, Simon, thank you so much for coming. This was very insightful, very helpful. And from a Katana perspective, uh, we have we have a lot of faith in terms of the people that we work with, in terms of like just being able to live up to the same values that we have. We want our software to work, and we want the partners that we work with, to believe in Katana, and we want to believe, we do believe in them very much so. So Simon, really appreciate the support for the webinar today, and for providing a really strong overview around all the value that you can bring in market and to Katana. So thank you.
And Mark, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure to share this with you. I hope for the people watching or who may get to see this, that it's been useful. And yeah, whether you choose to use Cohesis or not, hopefully it will help you think about what you do to plan for the future growth of your organizations. And look, we're delighted, from a Cohesis perspective, to be a Katana partner. We love the software. We think it's great. We've implemented it many times, and we appreciate the work that we do together as well. So thank you, Mark, as well, and also to your team.
Yeah, thank you, and happy Halloween, everyone.
Yeah, happy Halloween, everyone.
Take care. Have a great night and great day for those starting their day. Thank you.